Good morning. I'm Madison Allworth with YTV. I'm joined today by J.R. Reed to talk about business and entrepreneurship in New Haven in light of the upcoming mayoral election. J.R., thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
So I want to start first with talking about the growth of business and growth of entrepreneurship here in New Haven, seeing as both candidates have made this a major part of their platform in terms of running in the upcoming election. What do you think are the changes that need to happen to encourage business and also to grow entrepreneurship here?
It's a great question, and it's very important to realize that encouraging entrepreneurs and building an environment that's friendly for local entrepreneurs is one of the key drivers of this local economy. And so first, I think we should consider some of the positive elements that are already in place in the city. If we look at the Yale Entrepreneurial Institute, for example, that's considered one of the best incubators in the state. Then we also have the Grove, an organization in the downtown area that similarly helps local startups and businesses kind of in that developmental stage and in that beginning funding stages. And so we have those two already in place. What we need is some more organizations to bridge that next gap to that next stage of funding. And that's going to be really critical in kind of growing those connections. And so how do we do that? So there are three main ways that we can do that. First is that if we have incubators in the downtown area, like the Grove and YEI, as I've mentioned. We need to spread to the local neighborhoods outside of this downtown area so that people with that entrepreneurial spirit in those neighborhoods also feel like they can be supported and they can develop their businesses. And then second, there needs to be a greater link between the city and the state government to provide more resources for these local startups and entrepreneurs so that they can grow their businesses and we can spur the local economy. And then third, and this is an idea that was introduced by both of the candidates really, is to kind of provide a space, an all-inclusive space for resources, like one space for these resources for local businesses so that they know where they can go to have various resources for them and also advice to further develop their business. And so if we take those three approaches, I think that there are going to be a lot of more connections made, and then local businesses can take that step from kind of the beginning stages of their business to that stage where they get more funding and can potentially become a full-fledged business.
Great. So you touched upon on the beginning YEI and these other initiatives that involve current Yale students. And New Haven is really lucky in that there are a lot of higher education institutions here. So what I'm wondering is, what is the connection between these institutions and potential future growth for New Haven's economy?
That's another great point. There are a lot of amazing, innovative ideas coming from all these universities. You look at Yale, University of New Haven, Southern Connecticut State University, University of Connecticut as well. You have all of these institutions that are developing these innovative ideas that can really build this innovation economy that can thrive and can benefit everyone in the area. And the important thing to note is that a lot of these ideas coming out of these universities can only really be developed in these laboratories. So we need to make sure that we are able to bring these individuals with their ideas into the local economy and have them stay there so that they can further develop the local sector. And so the key piece of this puzzle then is, how do we keep these entrepreneurs in the New Haven area? Obviously, these ideas start at these universities, but after these students graduate who have developed these ideas, there's a tendency to move to places like Silicon Valley, like Cambridge, like Boston, like New York. And so the question is, how do we create an environment in New Haven where these entrepreneurs are going to want to stay and develop their business so that we can then see the trickle effect of there being a lot more jobs being created. And so that is a key point that both mayoral candidates have expressed over the past few weeks in their economic development strategy, is creating an environment, a New Haven environment that is very conducive to someone sitting down and staying here for a while.
Great. So a part of the economy that is very strong here is the growing biotech and pharmaceutical industry. I'm wondering, what is the role that has in New Haven's economy, and how do you see that growing in the future?
So there's huge potential, and there's a lot of advantages that we have from this growing biotech industry. And one of the candidates, Justin Elliker, told me, he said it best, I think, when in this day and age, there are a lot of companies that don't last very long, but we have two institutions here in New Haven, in the Yale New Haven Hospital, as well as the School of Medicine, that are going to be around for a long time and that continue to churn out innovative ideas, innovative companies, innovative businesses that can help develop this local economy. So we're at a real strategic advantage in that regard. The one issue is that this biotech industry is growing, but at the same time, it's not quite at the level of some of the other areas such as Silicon Valley and Cambridge, like we've talked about. And the reason for that is it's very hard to develop a critical mass in the New Haven area at the moment, just because it takes a lot of time to attract a lot of biotech firms to this area, because it's a relatively new sector in the area. And so once we start to have more and more biotech firms coming back into the New Haven area, you're going to see that sector grow even more. For example, we have Alexion, which is a major pharmaceutical firm, is going to relocate to New Haven starting in 2015. And that is a major, major development in terms of that industry and continuing to grow it. So the opportunity is there. We just need to create more and more businesses and more incentives for these biotech firms to stay in the area, because they can see that there are a lot of other biotech firms. They can collaborate together and we can have a growing industry as a whole.
Okay, JR, so you talked about Alexion moving to New Haven, but let's talk about moving around in New Haven. I know not only in the mayoral debate, we've also had the aldermans talking about transportation within the city. What's the importance of growing that, and how is that going to tie into also growing the economy here?
Yeah, it's another great point. Transportation is a key element of both of these candidates' economic strategies. And I think when we think about public transportation, we need to think about public transportation within the city of New Haven, and then public transportation and ways to get into New Haven. And historically, I think that we think about transportation as a way to get from point A to point B. But what we need to think about is that when someone is considering moving to a specific area, for example, New Haven, they want to make sure that there's going to be reliable transportation options for them. And so candidates have expressed interest in improving, for example, the CT transit system, perhaps creating a streetcar system like Justin Elliker has suggested. And so developing these transportation systems, perhaps linking the CT transit system with the Yale shuttle, so that it just offers more opportunities for individuals to get into the downtown area and then also to get back into their neighborhoods. Because if we look at the people who are suffering and not able to obtain jobs right now, we have minority communities that aren't able to access the jobs because of a lack of efficient public transportation. And that's something that's a major problem and something that really needs to be addressed. And then if we think about it on the other side of the equation and public transportation to the city, it's very important to think about how can we develop transportation options that make it easier for people to move, for example, from New York to New Haven or from Boston to New Haven, because there are a lot of people that are going to come into this area for brief periods of time based on their maybe an affiliation with the university or something along those lines. And they're going to want to be able to leave the city, quickly as well and in an efficient manner. And so developing, for example, Metro North lines to make commutes shorter. Tony Harpus suggested that, for example. Those types of solutions are ways that we can make the transportation options efficient between those city hubs, and then also make New Haven a more attractive place for a local business to want to get into, because they realize, there are going to be a lot of people who are going to be able to easily access this location that I'm in.
Okay, JR, and now to wrap this up, can you highlight 2 or 3 of, I would say, the most distinct differences between Alderman Elliker and Senator Harp's visions for economic development here in New Haven?
Definitely. So I think it's first important to realize that these two candidates share similar visions in terms of the fact that they understand that the biotech industry, for example, needs to grow. They understand that entrepreneurship needs to be developed even further, and that there needs to be more resources available for these entrepreneurs. They also believe that the research universities in the area are going to be very instrumental in terms of driving the innovation economy, and we need to create this environment in the New Haven area where entrepreneurs are going to want to stay here and build their businesses so that we can spur the local economy as a whole. That being said, there are 2 main differences that I think are important for viewers to understand. First off is that these candidates differ in their ideas for how they would like to transform the transportation options and system in the New Haven area. Justin Elliker tends to focus more on the inner city transportation options and further developing relationships between the CT transit system and the Yale shuttle to make that more accessible for a wide range of citizens. And then also, potentially developing a streetcar system, just making it easier for people to transport to different areas within the city and in the neighboring communities. On the other hand, Tony Harp has focused much more on the idea of creating better transportation options to the city of New Haven. Specifically, she has tried to develop a way for the Metro North to institute a 1-hour train ride commute from New Haven to New York, just to make it more efficient for people to come in and out of the city. She's still working on that initiative. It hasn't exactly been panned out yet. Another area I think that is important to recognize is that Justin Elliker is focusing on 3 main areas in which he wants to focus his economic development efforts. One is along the waterfront. He thinks that's an area that has a lot of economic potential, but it's very underutilized. Another is around the train station, another area that can lead to great economic prosperity for the New Haven area. And then third, around our neighborhoods and our communities. So focusing on those 3 areas is a central platform of Justin Elliker's campaign strategy. On the other side, I think Tony Harp is focusing more on her small business initiative. She's very focused on creating one area and one space to centralize resources for small businesses so that they can better access these things to better spur their particular ideas. And then with that, she would also like to link the city and state government to provide more resources for these businesses in general, so that they can develop these startups and then thrive in this area, and that will lead to more jobs in the future for New Haven residents.
Thanks, JR. Okay, one last question. So I know you're not running for mayor, but we've talked a lot about entrepreneurship and bringing a new business to New Haven. If you could bring any one business, which one would you bring to New Haven?
If I could bring any one business to New Haven. So I would have to say that considering how much potential I think this industry has, it would definitely be some type of biotechnology firm. Perhaps a company that has some type of pills or something like that that's going to be very easily accessible for New Haven residents, and it's going to create this critical mass of firms that both candidates talk about and think is so important to developing the local economy. I would also say that I think another key business that would thrive in New Haven would be Jamba Juice.
Thank you so much for joining us, JR.
Thank you very much for having me.
And thank you for watching. This has been Madison Allworth with YTV.